I'm excited about what you're doing, and I've been just watching that you've been on the big channels and actually showing
Yeah,
off like the in the field side of things.
yeah.
So it's kind of cool to get like a little view behind the scenes of the plastics and
It's something
yeah,
I don't talk about a lot with
yeah.
people because I assume most people think it's boring.
Honestly, I think that the people who are really good at what they do find what they do really boring. But you got to imagine if you're like from the outside looking at some guy doing, like high banking the beach in Nome,
Yeah.
and he's been there for years, and he's like, yeah, I don't know, I show up and I live here in a tent, and it's just life, like whatever.
Yeah.
You're sitting there like, wow, that's so crazy. You're like,
Okay.
you live in a van, this is awesome. He's just like, yeah, I kind of live in a van, it's pretty cool, but
So I definitely consider injection molding to be mundane
right,
as a profession, just because I've been in it for 10 years now.
yeah,
But talking about it, I
yeah,
find it to be very difficult to kind of get people to get interested. Like there's
yeah,
definitely people that want to
yeah.
see how the
Well, like you go to buy
you
a
know
gold pan.
mhm,
That's injection molded, is it not?
every single one.
Yeah.
The
And
only ones that
so
aren't are metal.
if
Yeah.
you're injection molding gold pans, I know that, for example, ABS has its like age issues versus ASA.
Hmm.
Could you injection mold in ASA to make it a UV
Yeah.
resistant pan for not much more in material?
You can even do things with ABS to make it UV
Like
resistant.
more, yeah, so
So
just
there's UV inhibitors
right.
that you can add.
And so that's where you're saying you're getting to the point now where you're mixing plastics and doing stuff and
Yeah.
you're trying to find like the ideal balance of everything and
And it's always like it's more an art than a science.
yeah.
There is
Yeah.
some science to it
That's
because
what I'm
you
learning with prospecting is you think there's a science, but no, it is an art and a
it
science,
is
and
an
it's a
art.
balance, and you
Yeah,
pick and choose your.
yeah, and you really it's a lot of experimentation,
Hmm.
and you can measure the result of something,
Yeah,
but just because you say, okay, this material has this impact resistance and this material has this strength, therefore mixing them I should get a mix of both. It doesn't necessarily end up like that. You
and
might
then
end up with a property
yeah,
that you didn't expect.
and then what happens at 0 degrees
Yes.
versus 30
Or you
degrees?
lose something even in the manufacturing process. There's a parameter called melt flow
Okay,
for the injection of
kind
the
of like a
actual material.
super scaled 3D print, like
Yeah,
the
so
okay,
you have your extrusion flow.
yeah,
Same thing.
yeah,
It goes through a barrel and then it gets. If you ever watched a YouTube video of how injection molding works,
a few,
it goes into a hopper and there's a big screw that basically mixes everything,
yeah,
and that's all heated.
yeah,
And then it gets to a certain point, it's pushing the material forward,
yeah,
and it fills the barrel.
yeah,
And then they say, okay, we're at temp, the barrel's full, push all that material into the mold.
right.
And so the actual pushing of the material happens in a couple seconds.
How does the air get out of the mold?
So
Is it the
you're
same as like pouring metal in like sand casting?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you have air escapes in the mold.
Okay.
Generally speaking, and I might be able to find a part to show you what
Yeah.
it looks like if you fail to evacuate the air. Are you familiar with there's a fire starting device?
Yes, it's a fire piston.
Yeah, fire
It's like a
piston.
diesel engine, but
Correct.
yeah,
So you just with air and ignition, you can do that, and
yeah.
it compacts all of that heat into a hot enough location to ignite a spark.
Okay.
So that happens in the mold.
Really?
So basically, if you don't evacuate the air, it becomes a giant fire piston,
Okay.
and it will burn your
So
material.
this is some heavy duty stuff going on, like high.
Yeah.
Okay.
So my systems run on a 550 metric ton press, and it's 550 metric tons of clamp force on the mold. So the thing when
Yeah.
it shuts, that's 550 tons,
Yeah.
and then the actual piston itself is going to match that.
Oh wow.
And so you can actually have molds where if they don't clamp properly, you can blow the mold open.
Right.
So you'll press it in, and then you get flash. So
Yeah.
if you've ever seen
Yeah, like on plastic
Yeah.
bottles, you get like the
yeah, that's called
like
flash.
where the joint is. That's
Yeah,
okay.
at the seam you'll see like a little ridge.
Yeah.
That's flash.
Okay.
And so those ridges can wear out. But
Yeah.
if you don't provide an air escape, and it's
Mhm.
like micrometer gaps,
Yeah.
where the air will get out but the material
Plastic.
won't.
Oh, yeah.
And so there's a science to that.
Right.
And the injection speed, and then most of the time spent injecting material is in cooling it.
Right.
So my systems have about like the hopper specifically
Yeah.
has about a 130-second cycle time
Right.
to open and shut.
Yeah.
So the injection is in 2 seconds,
Right.
but the rest of the time is the rebound
Yeah.
for refilling the barrel,
Yeah.
and then cooling the part
Yeah.
so that it's cool enough that you can take it out without it
And is
losing
this process like to ramp it up? Like once you have all your molds, can you just be like, hey, get me 10? Or is it sort of like you want to run this for 24 hours and get a larger batch
it.
built?
You run as long as you can afford to.
Right, and that
So,
so there's a cost to like get your stuff set up, and then a cost per unit.
Yeah.
And then okay.
Yeah. So for
I'm gonna stick to 3D printing for at least a year when it comes to coming up with my little bilge pump design.
I think people really underestimate, especially if you're in the U.S., if you're in North American manufacturing,
Yeah.
on the injection molding side of things.
Yeah.
The cost to just get a mold into a machine
Mm-hmm.
is immense.
Yeah.
You know, I'm several $1,000s into just getting my molds in.
Right.
My high bankers are 7 molds.
Right.
So that's 7 different processes. That's 7 different, events.
Yeah.
They're all on different size machines.
Yeah.
And luckily I have a really good relationship with my factory in
Yeah.
California.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I got to be sure.
Yeah.
And I need to know exactly what I'm
Yeah.
doing before I say, okay, go.
Yeah.
And because my checkbook's out. Like I pretty
Yeah.
much have
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
So people ask why they're so expensive. They're made of plastic. They should be cheap.
They aren't so expensive though. If you actually look at what it is compared to what's
I've had
out
the odd
there,
person say something.
it's definitely
Yeah.
made out of plastic, and it is a toy high banker to the person who doesn't want to be like,
Sure.
oh, plastic, it's garbage, right?
Yeah.
But then, yeah, you can work that thing. I'm assuming it's never gonna wear out. Like you'd have to
What I
put
tell
some
people,
real.
if somebody ever used one enough to wear it out,
You'd,
I will
you'd have
replace
paid
it.
it over many a time.
I'll replace it for them. I don't care.
Yeah.
Like if they wear out a hopper, if it's legit wore out from them running material,
Then give me
those are
that.
the people-
How many yards did you put through this thing? I need to
Yeah,
know. Like,
yeah.
that's awesome.
I want that. Like the most used one I ever saw
Yeah.
was by a guy not far from here.
Yeah.
Who works kind of up in on.
Yeah, I forget the actual name of the creek, but
up in an area
Yeah,
not
yeah,
far
yeah.
from here.
Yeah.
He did very well, and he wore my system out mostly.
Okay.
Like it got to the point where I was like, I don't really like the issues that have come up.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And he's like power user.
Did he ever mention how much gold came through that box?
Ounces.
Okay. Yeah.
It was many ounces.
Yeah, which
Yeah.
is wicked.
Yeah. So it's the sort of thing where those are the people I want that feedback. I want all that.
Right, like as of today, I go to your website and I order one of these in Canadian dollars, which is worth pennies to the U.S. right now. What are you charging for one of these boxes?
Just the base model, which is the Black Pro ones, are
Yeah.
$7.15 Canadian.
$7.15, and
Shipped.
that includes, or is it? This was just a little bit extra for.
Yeah,
right?
there's add-ons for bilge.
Yeah.
I actually just got the 2000 back in stock.
Okay.
But $7.15 Canadian for the base system, has mats, has
Yeah.
everything you need.
Yeah.
Other than you can do the add-on kit for the hoses
Yeah.
and pump, and then I have batteries as well if you want to go that route. But there's lots of options. So.
It weighs about as much as a 2-inch dredge.
Yeah.
No, that's cool. So definitely we'll have to, I don't know, have a look at one of these at one point.
We'll pull one out.
But
yeah.
You said you were interested in potentially taking this on a trip to New Zealand, or well, I don't know what details should be out there. So I'll just. You were interested in one of these.
I'm going to New Zealand again. I'm already booked.
Okay.
So I am doing that.
Okay.
I am very interested in this because there is a place in New Zealand that we may have opportunity to helicopter in.
Yeah.
And we won't have the time to take in a full dredge because you have to sling a full dredge.
Yeah.
And I don't want to do that. So
Yeah.
I want to backpack in a dredge.
And this is basically that.
And the timing was good. So
any 2-inch dredge is a sniping assistant, essentially, and a crack cleaning tool.
Okay.
You're not going to be moving ridiculous yardage compared to a 4-inch, right?
Right.
But I just recently went sniping.
Mhm.
And of course there's some pretty ridiculous, nuggets, like where's my little clinker down here? So you're sitting there and you're just wafting material out of cracks, and it's like there's the muck that gets in the way, and to be able to use something like this to just assist would be awesome.
Yep.
And so I'm trying to basically, there's lots of room for modification and improvement still because of a 3D printer. I can basically, hey, let's try this out, let's try that out, and I'll tell you about like the Riffle design and how that might evolve. But basically what we have is it's in a box. You got your hoses, you got your bilge pump, and essentially the bilge pump just sets on the ground, plugs into here, and here's your nozzle. So that is your PETG. It's 100% infill, basically a hunk of plastic.
Okay. Yeah.
And the front threads on and off. It's amazing that you can 3D print threads that work that well.
Yeah.
And
I was
so
actually going to say, like, this is
Bamboo Labs, and I've set the layer thickness to 0.12 of a millimeter,
Yeah, I was
and
gonna
then
say,
it's
what's about-
variable layer, so it
Yeah.
doesn't take like 8 days to print. But when it gets to stuff like threads, so this one threaded piece glues in, and this is printing in one piece.
Okay.
And then for the print, this top section, you'll notice it's got a weird shape.
Yeah.
So I made a pentagon, and so the inside and the outside is a pentagon. So there's never a point that has like the top of a circle.
Oh, just to reduce the overhang?
Yeah, so there's no overhang.
Okay.
And so if you actually snap this thing in half or like pause the print, you can see it's just like a really nice smooth inside, and it all prints without supports that you have to tear out of there.
The print is clean, I gotta say.
It's-
Like, this is impressive.
It's a wicked printer. And then this taper's big, so you can use a hose clamp on the pressure side.
Okay.
But it's nice sometimes to be able to pop this off the hose without having to clamp.
Yeah, I can see the
So
taper on
it actually tapers up,
Yeah.
so you can just
Press
twist
that
the hose on, and then it's like really easy to pop off and on.
Nice.
And then because this is threaded, you either can just replace that tip if it wears out. I can design different, everyone has a different idea of what the ideal, suction tip is, but I haven't been seeing clogs through this. Like, it's reduced enough. And then, you got your crevicing tool to get a little deeper. There's obviously room for more stuff, but
How much sniping have you done?
I have only recently gotten into sniping in the last 3 years.
Okay.
I'm like under an ounce sniped.
Okay. I mean, that's still,
Yeah.
If you're near an ounce, that's a respectful
Yeah.
amount.
Yeah.
But the reason I'm asking is just because then you probably know one of the biggest problems is just getting, like, I call it the kitty litter,
Yeah.
out of holes when you're just fanning forever and ever, and it'd be
Yeah.
nice just to
This
dredge
thing
it out.
has really good suction. There are situations with a gasoline-powered dredge where you actually need to glue some neoprene to the back of your fingers so that you don't like onto a 3 or 4 inch dredge, so you don't crush your hand with the rocks
Yeah.
and the suction.
Yeah.
You're not going to see that level of painful suction on this 2 inch, but it'll grab a pretty big rock and just stick it to the front here, even with these little.
I had a
blade
2-inch
gaps.
nozzle.
Yeah.
I had a 2-inch nozzle I ran with a WX-15,
Right.
and I never used it
Yeah.
because it was just too much gear to haul in.
Yeah.
And so I ended up selling that kit, but this is perfect as a...
The guys who know how to run these, you can see, the Bering Sea Gold stuff, you sit there and you're letting everything kind of come
Yeah, you
in,
bring
and
the
you're
material to
controlling and
it,
everything
yeah.
like this.
You're not jamming
But-
it into the ground.
Blind pair of hip waders, you'll see some guys and they just have this down there like this, and their hands just throwing rocks out like crazy, and they're grabbing, they're using their hand as like a screen, and they're
Yeah.
just shaking out the light kitty litter, and they've got a handful of rocks, and it's an amazing thing to observe somebody who's just absolutely working one of these nozzles, and you can get a lot done.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've seen any of the videos of this thing, but you have it under this much water, and there's a whirlpool going down to it.
Yeah.
So
When you get them dialed in, they
Yeah.
work really well.
and
They
with
do.
this pump, considering this is an off-the-shelf thing, so we're trying to keep the cost reasonable, right?
Yeah.
You're looking at what, $3,000 Canadian for a 2-inch dredge combo on floats, and maybe more.
More than
More
that
than
now,
that, yeah. So it's if you can have something that it's. I don't even think you could say a regular 2-inch is going to get Alberta flower gold. Not
No.
that we're after Alberta flower gold because of legal reasons, but there's places in the world that have really fine gold.
Mhm.
Subsurface gold dredges, I think it can be done, and I'm going to work on it with a sump system, but that's a future project. But this'll capture your gold.
Yeah.
And you just don't expect Nome Beach level ultra fine stuff. But the system, this is your intake, and it's locked together, so you can sort of see how that's all one piece.
Yeah.
You pop this off,
Okay.
it comes apart,
Very cool.
and then this snaps off the bottom, and the same piece that holds them together, just line that up, also holds
Oh, that
that
holds.
on.
Okay.
So that
Very
would
cool.
basically be one segment, and then if you want to add a segment to it and just sort of assemble it here,
Yeah.
I'll let you probably pop that off to get it all together. And you can bend these to touch themselves without them snapping, but
Oh, okay.
yeah, they're.
I didn't want to.
It's actually it's pretty durable stuff.
I didn't want you to
Yeah.
me to snap your.
And then so there's your tail end, And this separate piece on the tail end just for printing, but
Okay.
having that flared, I actually had like the flow meter in there, and it does. It's sort of the same way with like a performance vehicle, the way your headers can like do exhaust scavenging.
Okay.
It basically takes the velocity of the water going through the tube, and by opening it up, it slows it down, and so you're actually harvesting energy, and you will get better suction by having a flare at the back end.
That's interesting.
So it's an effective. It actually increases. Like I did everything to try to get the most out of one of these pumps.
Yeah, for sure.
And so the system that you're currently holding, let's just get you the strap for the front here, so that everything kind of holds together. Now you could run it like this. I printed this on the bottom.
So these okay,
yeah, you basically
straps.
set it on here, and then you kind of just get a thumb and snaps into place.
Nice.
I don't want to risk if I happen to have several grams of gold in here, because you can like tear it apart without breaking it, but then it's torn apart and you've lost some gold.
Right.
So I figured I'd put these little snaps on here just to be safe about it. And this system is essentially ready to go. Now the hose, there's potentially room for improvement here. Different hoses are going to have different like patterns and sizes and everything. So I printed out some of these that are just completely open. Okay. If anyone's watching this for the first time, this is a 3D file that you can actually download from utmostoutdoors.com and then print it out on your own printer. But I have a couple options here. So this one, it threads on here. But I was doing some tests on recovery of really fine gold. And in the field, you just unscrew it, shake it into a gold pan. But I didn't want any, like in the gap between the hose and thing.
Yeah.
So I just glued this together.
Yeah.
So this is solid. And then if you want to put it onto here, you got this big awkward thing to screw it together.
Yeah.
But really,
you just take that apart. Yeah, I gotcha.
Yeah.
I gotcha.
So now you can take this and you thread it together. And this doesn't actually need to be tight, so it actually acts as a bit of a pivot if you want, or you can like screw it right tight.
Nice.
But then you pop that back together, and I'll just put this back on here, and that goes back. Snap. Cool. And in this orientation, this hose, it has a little bit of memory, but like if you bend it back, then it goes straight, so you can basically get it to like where you want it in the hole. And the only problem is, okay, so does this stay level? Does it stay floating? Like, is your gold going to tip out of it? And that's where, this was like my favorite eureka moment. How do we make floats for this thing? So I'm going to ship this, and this is where I'm curious about your opinion on what's in the box and everything.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to ship it with these, because they just work. But you can use any like 1 liter smart water bottle or a Coke bottle or whatever. And this is your floats. And I'm sure in like a really high speed creek, like if you're fighting a current and everything, it's not a lot of flotation. But usually there's like a pool that you're working, and then you put the nozzle into where the motion is, and you can usually make it work.
Okay.
So that floats, and it keeps it level, left and right, within reason.
Yeah.
And because it's an enclosed sluice, if the front were to like dip down or up at all, which you can change the size of your floats, doesn't matter, because the velocity going over the riffles is the same.
Okay.
With a surface sluice, the steeper it gets, the faster your water flow.
Yeah.
With this, it's fully enclosed, so it actually wouldn't matter.
Yeah, I didn't look at your riffles. It does change where the material settles, so it will change things a little bit.
The direction of gravity is different, but not the energy of water.
Yeah.
So like within 10 degrees.
Yeah, and you're not going to get much deviation.
But yeah, so like basically you would slap a nozzle on the end, and then this floats, and then I don't know, see how that, give it the little rotation with the nozzle and lock it into whichever place you want.
Oh, yeah, okay.
But like if this is just floating around in the water, and then now you've got, as far as not having like air system and weights and everything, like you're backpacking this in, you're just gonna have a snorkel and a mask.
Yeah.
5 feet is plenty of depth.
I would almost, the only thing I would add to this right now,
without
having used it, so take this with a
grain of salt. I'm very curious.
I would add a ring here
that
you can actually anchor it somewhere.
So it doesn't just go wandering.
Yeah. Any water pressure on this
in
the flow of the river is pulling on the nozzle because the nozzle is anchoring.
Yeah.
So if you can anchor this and have the nozzle be free, then you end up, I don't know if you've ever worked with a nozzle.
You'd be able to place it more easily so that if you're working out in this direction and it's starting to follow you into the current, you actually want it over here. So I guess your short-term solution would be tie a little rope around it,
Yeah.
but to have an anchoring
Something,
ring of some kind.
yeah, I would just like have a ring that you can put
Yeah.
a carabiner onto.
Yeah.
With, you know, I would probably, if I wanted to get really fancy, I would have a mesh bag I put rocks in and just
Right.
literally make an anchor.
Yeah.
And clip it and then set it up somewhere that I knew wouldn't be too turbulent.
Yeah.
And within reach of where I needed to be.
Yeah.
How much hose can you have?
With this setup
Yeah.
and this hose, you have more than enough suction, and I've tested it with 15 feet.
Okay.
I would probably I like more suction than less.
Mhm.
I would say 10 feet of hose. You'd be.
So you
totally
do
fine.
lose some suction as you. Is that just back
It's
pressure?
with this hose being a smooth bore,
Uh-huh.
not much.
Is it, okay.
But you know, for what fits in the box, I figured this is sort of a good length, and it's for most situations. I don't suspect like you can just sort of have this follow you around.
Yeah.
But there's definitely like, hey, I need to dredge over here, and then I'm up over a pile of rocks, and I'm up into this hole here. So just having a longer hose would be helpful, and you do still have suction.
So I definitely, my experience dredging, which is fairly limited, not a professional dredger by any stretch, but what I do know about it is having this disconnected from the nozzle is like only connected obviously by the material flow.
Yeah.
But when you're dredging,
You got it over a knee, you're going
you got
around.
this going,
Yeah.
and you're moving this around, and this is connected.
Mhm.
That's moving around also.
Yeah.
And if you in a heavy water flow, that's pulling on your nozzle.
Yeah.
So that then you have to fight it to keep
Yeah.
the nozzle where you want it.
Yeah.
So a lot of times, what I like to do if I'm dredging, especially with the 2-inch,
Yeah.
I would lay the nozzle on the ground and just move fan material toward the nozzle.
Mhm.
And you wouldn't be able to do that. If you let go of it,
Yeah.
it's gonna go.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. There you go.
yeah.
So yeah, like a little anchor leash, like a piece of paracord wrapped around here, or a
Really anything.
clipboard or something.
I would probably even, if I was super lazy, where'd it go? I don't have one kicking around, but I would use one of my mesh bags for my systems. I'd literally just throw some rocks in there, tie a paracord to it, and tie it to that, and just
Perfect.
I'd probably tie it right here.
Yeah,
But
and I really don't know for something this small and this size and what you're going to be using it for. I don't really have the experience of where, like, you need to see the creek, have the problem, find the solution to the problem, and so if this actually gets used and we can start seeing like feedback on this would be nice or that would be nice, or I swapped these for like 1 liter bottles because I was in a bit of a current and I needed more stability, or whatever comes back, or hey, I needed a 10-foot hose. Suction wise, your 10-foot hose will be fine.
Yeah.
I probably would avoid a 20-foot hose.
10 is a good amount. That's a good amount.
Like even 5. Like by the time you so long as you're in a pool where it can actually float behind you.
Yeah.
Like you can't long arm like deeper than this. So
I think 10 feet, if it'll handle 10 feet comfortably, then I would say that's even better to anchor your system.
Right.
And then you kind of have your zone you can work within.
Yeah.
And that's what I would do.
Right.
Just to simplify the whole setup.
Yeah.
And then you can drop it, leave it, don't have to
And
worry
like
about
if you had a smaller brushless version of this that was mounted to the dredge, so it kind of floats around with you, then maybe it's something that just tows behind you and like goes where you go. But with this having to drag along the creek every time you move, having a little more reach would be a
If
benefit.
you have like cleanish bedrock that you were working and you're just cleaning out crack after crack, then dragging it with is perfect.
Yeah.
If you want to set up somewhere and you need to move material, you got to anchor it, I think, in my opinion. One thing that would be very interesting, and I don't know if it's possible, because your pump is connected to your nozzle, having a cutoff switch on your nozzle for your pump would be nice too.
Right.
Just like shut down, click it off.
I think my thought on this was I basically took a battery and with these XT60 connectors, if you put this in fresh water, there's no parasitic drain. And if you put this in full-on salt water, it was 3.5 watts. So a little dielectric grease on there to prevent corrosion. Yeah. And this is your switch.
Yeah.
So I don't have a switch. It's basically you plug it in and it runs. You unplug it and it stops.
Okay.
And in my tests, I wasn't seeing like a scour, so you can just start and stop and start and stop.
Yeah.
And it's not going to lose you gold. And then basically what I did here is included in this.
Oh, okay.
I've basically got your clamps. I'm gonna mess our mic up there.
That's all right.
But yeah, I basically got your clamps, and then so this goes to your battery. So you basically any battery you have, you just hook up to with the clamps.
Yeah.
And then this is a 10-foot extension cord, so your battery can sit on shore, and then you can toss this, wherever you are.
Right.
So long as you're within that range of shore, being able to set it on a rock or something, then this bilge pump can basically just go anywhere within that reach, as opposed to having to float the battery or have it in a backpack or waterproof it or whatever. And it was all basically just trying to keep this as small and packable as possible.
Yeah.
I figured this cord is a lot lighter than something to float a battery. And so you just set the battery on shore. So we could have the battery like over there, and then your bilge pump could be over here, and then your dredge could be over here.
Right.
And so you get a pretty decent reach out of it.
Yeah.
And that's sort of one of many potential solutions. Obviously, I originally had a Pelican case with a battery in it. I was just using an 18-volt tool battery with a DC to DC converter to bring it down to the 12 volts for this.
Okay.
And the Pelican case was one of the floats. So I basically had a Pelican case on one side, and then the bilge pump mounted to the side of the Pelican case, and then the dredge mounted to the other side of the bilge pump, and then your other float was one of these out the other side. So the whole system just floated around behind you. But then, you either got to get a Pelican case and put everything in there versus just you buy a battery. You can buy any size of battery you want.
Right.
If you want a big battery and you want to run all day, if you want a little battery and you want to do a little something smaller, and then you just run an extension cord to shore. And so there's a ton of potential use cases, but really it's a sluice box that's underwater. It's light and small.
I think this is the way to go. Having I'm a battery on shore kind of guy. Because
the amount of float you would need to carry to put that out here.
That's a 13-pound battery.
Yeah.
And that's still lithium.
Yeah.
Like that's still 13 pounds. The weight is more than this system.
Yeah.
So, you don't have the displacement to support that. You need to add another float or two or three. So, I think
we're definitely working around the limitations of a small compact system, being that I'm using like water bottles as floats.
Yeah.
And so, you're not floating anything on here except for the sluice. And then all your weight is on shore, and this sits on the ground.
Yeah.
And so, if you have a 20-foot deep hole and you're trying to dive down, and you might want a traditional gold dredge for that with a 20-foot hose and your weights, and then it doesn't matter that your dredge is an entire load all by itself, because you also have to carry 60 pounds of lead in your wetsuits.
Yeah, no.
So
this is a very similar sort of target audience to what I'm doing.
Yeah.
As far as more a focus on the packability and efficiency of the setup and access.
Yeah.
So
you're going to take some limitations to it.
Yeah.
But if you basically just want to put on a pair of hip waders and take a knee in some shallow bedrock cracks and have something to suck it out, then it's probably the lowest barrier to entry crevice sucking tool.
Well, not to mention the lowest cost dredge that I know of is still a couple grand.
Yeah.
So think about that.
You can take it to more places.
Yeah.
And practically speaking, it will capture the same gold.
Yeah.
Fine gold limited, I'm assuming. We'll do some tests.
It might. It could.
I think North Saskatchewan River gold, which is notoriously difficult to capture.
Yeah, I've done that recently.
Even if you caught 50% of it,
yeah.
I would definitely say in that case it would be good to have the sump system and everything. But just imagine how well you're going to capture like normal gold.
Yeah.
Like most gold mining tools, you will capture 90% of your gold in the top foot.
Yep.
And the rest is just there for show or for security.
That's mine. 90% in the top mat,
and
then the rest is there just as insurance.
Yeah.
Really. It's one thing that I say these things a lot. I talk about access and opportunity.
Yeah.
And that's really with what I'm doing. That's what I'm trying to provide to my customers: access and opportunity.
Yeah.
Get them in gear that is approachable.
Yeah.
And gives them access and more opportunity that they wouldn't otherwise get panning, or they wouldn't otherwise get with a more traditional system.
Yeah.
Something like that. And you find that you can get out to areas that have better gold. Because you're not hauling a huge system.
Well, the Keen guys were saying that some of the best gold that's being found right now is with 2-inch dredges that people can pack out into the creeks that haven't been done.
Yep.
Like, just look at, there's a pretty significant sized nugget that came out of just swimming.
Yeah.
Like sniping. Yeah. And so, if this just helps the sniper get, a few little things, but you can actually use it. And like you were saying, Dan Hurd, he seems to have gravitated towards just using your machine more often because it's something that he can actually just carry in and use.
Yeah.
And rather than having like a big ordeal of going in by yourself and packing something. So like my Utmost Adventure big aluminum high banker, it's designed specifically for the type of situation I was in, where I think I shoveled like 1,600 shovels in a day.
Yeah.
It was loose, sandy gravel with a lot of black sand. You need a 20-inch wide high banker.
Right.
And it was like, cool. That's the machine that I was using.
Yeah.
I would not really want to. I mean, there's some targets out there that have the right kind of material that you could, with a couple guys pack it in and make a weekend out of it. But as like a little prospecting day trip, you'd never want to bring something that's 37, close to 40 pounds. And
you waste half your day bringing it in.
Yeah.
And then,
And the pump to feed it. Like,
and the pump.
So everything scales up. And so the Gold Trek high banker or the, like, yes, we have our limitations.
Have you named this yet?
I have not named it. It is I have not named it.
You'll have to come up
It
with
is the
something.
Utmost Outdoors 2-inch subsurface gold dredge.
Okay.
This
Nice.
one's name is Jolene.
Jolene, oh, beautiful.
Put me on the spot here. I made it up.
With Dan, my understanding is that my system's so light and easy for him that he just leaves it in his truck and just has it with him.
Mm-hmm.
So if he's out and he needs to do a gold video, he'll pull it out and do a gold video. Like, it's easy. And he had his heart surgery and he can't overexert.
Mm-hmm.
And I've talked with him about that a little bit, and he just likes to, you just throw it on the back and go.
Yeah.
So, it's, even for guys that are serious, it's been a success.
Yeah.
Right.
And like I said, I was out with my jet boat, and I just went to one of the more popular spots because I needed like a way to do a quick test. And I met a guy with a 6-inch high banker, homemade aluminum on a cart and everything. And you could look at it and say, this could be optimized or that could be made better.
Or something.
But he was just there and he was feeding it at the pace that it could keep up for that Alberta gold. And by the end of the day, he had a giant pile of tailings to knock down, and like he was getting some good color in the pan, right? So it's like, you basically size your equipment for what you plan on doing.
Yeah.
And this is basically, I saw a gap. Like, you don't have an electric gold dredge that is this small, that is also kind of a complete system with floats and the hose. And I kind of wanted to say, well, first of all, you can 3D print it yourself, which is kind of cool, because then we're going to learn from what other people are doing and changing.
Yeah.
And then also, like, if this is the size box, and I'd be really interested, give it a little test run, see what she does, but it might be the type of thing that you could put in a backpack, take in a helicopter into a remote creek, and have as a little assistance for your sniping.
Yeah.
When you're on like a trip someplace, you can use one of these things. I'd be really interested to see the feedback of like after actually putting it to use. But
shortly after I started using my old 2-inch dredge, I decided I hated the nozzle, pump, high bankers, kind of that dredge setup.
Yeah.
Because it was so cumbersome.
Right.
Just to even just set up and run.
Mm-hmm.
I'm dragging all these hoses around. It's just a huge pain.
Yeah.
And at that time, that was before I started the high banker project.
Yeah.
I was like, how could I run this off of Belgian battery? And everything that I found was like bilge pumps were just inadequate.
Mm-hmm.
But now with the work you've done, you found that the bilge pumps are. But you can squeeze out that
we're
extra
squeezing
efficiency.
out enough that, like, the biggest part of this whole thing initially was, can I get the plumbing to work?
Yeah.
And holy crap, did I ever!
Yeah.
Like this thing, you won't be complaining about suction.
Well, so that's the thing is, I tried it. That's why I got this pump.
Yeah.
To try with the 2-inch.
Yeah.
It's literally the reason I bought it.
Yeah.
And it didn't work because I had to push the material too high up into my high banker.
Yeah.
And I didn't have the design experience at the time to do a subsurface sluice. So You know, and you run into, you know, where I live now, regulatory problems
Yeah.
and stuff like that. So it's just, I pretty much abandoned that project.
Yeah.
I focused on high banking.
Yeah.
And that's where I ended up going with this stuff because that's what I know.
Yeah.
So
it was interesting going to Australia because I was there for a year and I didn't, you know, I needed something to do with my spare time, and I started thinking more internationally. Like, I built a high banker because I was mining the North Saskatchewan River, and I built the high banker for exactly what I was doing, and it's, in my opinion, the best high banker in the world for what I was doing.
Yeah.
I would 100% pick one of these for a backpacking trip into the woods to prospect.
And that's
right.
Yeah.
So then when I was there, I was like, okay, dredges. I've always been interested in the plumbing and just fiddling around, and then I got a little more into, okay, well, let's actually put something together. And of course, you've got New Zealand right there, and so I made it, and then I figured out all these other little things. So like we were talking about the Riffle design.
Yeah, I wanted to see this.
So it's basically like the Hungarians have that 15-degree tilt, and then it's a drop riffle. I tried to make it a little deeper than it needs to be so that it never like fully empties out.
You know what this reminds me of?
Oh! Would you look at that? Yeah. And then the only difference is this is perfect for a 6-inch wide high banker, and in a dredge that might tip side to side slightly, I just put the little slosh troughs.
Yeah, no, I like it.
And then I don't know, like it seems to, like, just in the testing I did in my garage, I'm confident I'm going to catch most gold, except, and this is where we're constantly upgrading.
Mm-hmm.
You know that 1/2 ounce nugget I showed you?
Yeah.
Big round nugget. It's big enough that it can roll.
Yeah.
So I obviously never tested it going through here, but it got me thinking that maybe I should have one of these trays with bigger spacing, one of these trays like this, and then potentially the third tray is miner's moss with expanded, but the 3D printed version of that. And I have yet to test which one of these is best, and so when I put this in a box and people buy it, I'm going to have to basically give them like 1, 2, 3, and then they'll have all 3 options.
Yeah.
And if I upgrade something in the future that's better, they're going to be stuck with the old version and the worst gold recovery, but you know, they could order a couple upgraded trays later. And
well, I mean, you
like how much time do I spend perfecting this versus saying, hey, for like 700, I don't know exactly what it's going to cost to like make this all pay and work it out, but well under $1,000 in a box delivered to you with everything, and then you just buy whatever battery is appropriate.
Yeah.
And hopefully it's good enough, and if I upgrade something, I can say, hey, here's like a little upgrade package. And
there's a couple changes I'd make to this that I think would probably retain your nuggets better.
Yeah.
But one thing I've noticed, some feedback I've gotten on this mat, it's really good for fine and medium gold. It's actually the big round nuggets that are most likely to make it through this mat.
Yeah.
And that's only because...
Same thing with like rough top conveyor belt and the bigger pieces.
Yeah. And because they roll.
Yeah.
You know, they generally, well, not...
If you were to take a section of this and just cut out a riffle, like every second riffle for 3 spots, would that be a nugget trap?
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I could easily do that too. I've got this little tool I use.
It'd actually be interesting if you have a handful of nuggets to just,
I could literally just zip one of these off.
Yeah. And you probably only need one, because a nugget like that is not looking to...
Yeah, I mean, probably the first riffle you could do that with.
Yeah.
And so it's the large round nuggets that...
I never thought I'd have the problem of like, will I hold on to a 1/2 ounce nugget? And then I saw a 1/2 ounce nugget for real, and I was like, I know this is so rare. You'd probably see it. Like you'd be sniping.
That's what I was gonna say. Is if you're dredging and there's a 1/2 ounce nugget, you're gonna have a hard time sucking it up.
Yeah.
To start with.
Those are tense.
So you'll see it, and odds are you won't suck it up. You'll just pick it up.
Yeah.
And so generally, the feedback I got for the big nuggets for my matting.
Are they even making it through the screen to the mat at that point?
The 3/8 is pushing it. So I mean, if you're in an area with that big of gold, I hope you're checking your tailings anyway.
Yeah.
Like even if you had like a cheap little metal detector for that. But the guy, I have a customer who's runs a mine up in Wells.
Yeah.
And he loves my matting.
Yeah.
And he like runs a full trommel.
Yeah.
My mat's not in his trommel. He runs expanded and miner's moss in his trommel. But he uses my system for his cleanups. He used to use a gold cube. Now he uses mine.
Yeah.
And he said, I think on the stripping run, like the first run, he'll have you know, basically a Rubbermaid tub full of cons.
Yeah.
And I'll get he said 98.2% average.
Well, how long is his recovery sluice or his cleanup sluice?
It's one of my systems.
Oh, like it's
literally just my high banker.
Just the high banker.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he just has a high banker
and just
he
shovels
uses
in
it
the
as
high
a cleanup.
banker. Yeah.
And 98+% recovery. Okay. But he texted me and he said, the only problem is that if I have a big nugget, it'll roll down. And I'm like,
so classify your cleanup.
Cleanup. Yeah. So that's it. Yeah. But most of the time.
Yeah. That's interesting because like when I visited Papua New Guinea, you got to make sure that the high banker has everything. Maybe a spare roll of tape, like a snuffer bottle, like just anything you could think of, because you're gonna go from a river sluice or gold pans to upgrading, and you got to have everything.
Yeah.
And what I actually want to do, I'm still a little testing away from moving away from the expanded over miner's moss for like that Alberta gold. I got so attached to it, it's just magic voodoo that holds on to everything at the expense of having a lot of concentrates.
Yeah.
And then I'm thinking I could make basically some sort of a profile that is a 3D printed cleanup sluice that just fits inside the high banker, and then it could be in the same box. And so if somebody's paid all this money to ship this machine out, then at the end of the day you do your cleanups, you just throw the little sluice into the high banker. It's already level at the right height, and you can sort of spoon into that.
Yeah.
Because it's like the double level 10-inch wide machine, you'd have to have like basically a separate little trough, like maybe something this wide, and just set it in there, and then that could be your sort of cleanup sluice, and that would be a way that I could get like just a little bonus that wouldn't cost me a lot extra to go like, here's your production shovel-in system for the village to shovel with.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, you just slide this thing, it's already level, and you just spoon it in. The same pump can be running.
I love that stuff because that's a really, for you, inexpensive way to add value to a system, add functionality to a system.
And imagine shipping it separately. It's the whole, the box, the airplane, and everything. So if you're buying the box anyways, and you can get more things included, then it's just a little bonus like that, right?
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
It'll be really interesting, playing with riffles and mats, and I'll have to give these guys a good proper test.
Yeah, that'd be cool. I'd love to.
Yeah. Basically, based on what I'm looking at, it's the same idea where it's like sort of a Hungarian top, but it's a drop riffle. But all of Hungarian riffle is a drop riffle with miner's moss at the bottom. Really.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they seem to work, and
I like this concept a lot.
That caught a lot of North Saskatchewan River gold.
Yeah,
on my test.
I would expect it to.
Yeah.
I would even raise the riffles a little more, just to get, because the fine gold, like the NSR gold.
Yeah.
I find the biggest disruption is actually the bigger rocks rolling over. So if you have this in a 2-inch dredge, you have 2-inch rocks rolling over.
Yeah.
Every time they go by, they're disrupting the flow a little bit.
Right.
So with miner's moss, it kind of helps things dig in. It'll help the gold dig in further. But if you have any flakes sitting on top of the miner's moss, you might end up kicking those out.
Right.
Every time a big rock, so it'll go just jump down.
Yeah, it's really interesting how different sizes of gold, sometimes the bigger stuff can actually give you some trouble.
It's the very round nuggets are probably the second hardest. The first hardest are the really thin ones that get bent. It's like a little kite, and it wants to just sail down.
That's the Fraser River Challenge.
Yeah, and so if I ever check my tailings and there's anything big, it's always a flat kite that's bent.
And you're capturing most of the dots.
Yeah.
That's why I can't get behind like a fluid bed style for flour gold, because the shape of the gold lets it.
Yeah. And they don't tolerate much in the way of surging or any variation in the setup. Like if you get them optimized, set up perfectly, they run pretty well. But as soon as you start throwing new variables in, they kind of shut down.
Yeah. So that's why I'm still married to this miner's moss, because it's like there's magic voodoo that's going on in there, and it's just below the surface. You know that some magic is happening, and of course the disadvantage is you got to do a proper clean out. Whereas if you were just running this and you're in an area where you weren't that concerned about the fine gold, and you say, hey, guess what? It's time for a clean out. Well, you know what you do?
Oh, run it upside down into a.
So it's time for a clean out. You just
turn it over,
shake it into a pad.
Yeah.
And get back to it.
You could probably just turn the system on and flip it upside down and run it into a bucket if you wanted to.
Absolutely. So, it would be...
Yeah.
Like you can pop each individual tray out, but let's be real. If you just have these drop riffles in here, and you just shake it upside down and then go do your next hole. Mm-hmm. Oh, I think I saw a nugget go up. Let's check.
I'm really interested to see how this looks after it's been well tested.
Yeah.
And
I can't see this wearing out any quicker than a hose, like PVC versus PETG.
Your nozzle tip is going to be your
the nozzle tip, and that's why it's threaded, so that.
Yeah.
I think I threw a extra tip in here somewhere, but we'll find it.
Just this one.
Oh. Well, there will be like two of the same.
Okay, yeah.
So that can just be like, hey.
Yeah.
I don't want people to have to be like, oh crap, it's all worn out, and so yeah.
You're gonna make some enemies with the backed miner's moss, though. I will tell you that.
You know, I've definitely been down that. In my experience, so there's different thicknesses of moss, and because of my little love affair with fine gold, I'm running a little lower energy than most. Okay. So when I ran a thicker moss, I noticed that what happened is the moss filled up with fine material, and the bottom half of the moss never exchanged, so I could run an entire day. The top would be all black sand, and the bottom would still be fine.
Okay.
When I went to a thinner moss, so this is at a half inch, it's like 3/8, it's about 8 mil thick.
Yep. Yep.
So because it's a thinner moss, so long as you're not like putting this under 1 inch Hungarian riffles in a massive wash plant, you need thicker moss for that. But for the low energy that I've tried to do in this, as well as my high banker, this allows just enough room for everything to, like, it's all black sand, and it happens to clean out really easily.
Okay.
So I remember a guy, he used to take his mats that were not backed, so he'd have like the V grooving behind it, and the thick like 3M moss, and he'd say, you can't clean it all out in a bucket when it's wet. What you got to do is you got to actually take it and hang it to dry, and then once it's dry, you beat it and you get the last of the stuff out. If you have gold that's that connected to your miner's moss, that is in there, you just put it back in, and you'll get to run again, and then you take it back out the next day, and it's still there.
Yeah.
So I find that this actually cleans out really easy. You just do a little like that in the pan, especially in this size, whack it out.
Yeah.
And I don't think you're going to have any trouble actually getting your gold out of this.
Okay.
But let me know. It's the shape of the weave, the thickness, and then it's just been amazing on Alberta fine flour gold. So
cool.
Let's see if I can change your mind.
I mean, you might. Yeah. I don't use a lot of miners.
This you need to swap it. It can go in either way. It's the one thing I didn't make like.
Oh, directional?
None of these you can mess up, but this would be directional. Maybe you accidentally put it in the wrong way and discover a brand new secret.
The secret is it loses all your gold.
Yeah, could be. But yeah, that's basically the system. I'd love to see it in action if it works out, but either way, just let me know if you do manage to run some tests or whatever. And
are you leaving this year?
January 22nd, I fly back to Australia, and I will be there for the foreseeable future.
Okay. But are you leaving the dredge here?
I am.
Oh, okay. Cool.
But you wanted to play with it, so.
Yeah, I definitely do. Yeah, I've got my New Zealand trip in February.
Yeah.
So I wanna do that, and I thought this would be really cool because I could actually bring it with me without.
If you actually bring this to New Zealand, snap a video of it running and give us the honest like, this is great, not so good for this, and we work with what we get.
Yeah, I'll probably have to go down to Washington and do some testing before I go to New Zealand.
Right. Yeah.
But we'll see if the weather allows it.
The Pacific Northwest is one of those beautiful things where you get rain, and I mean, we're just dry suit sniping.
True.
So
yeah,
there's always an opportunity.
That is true. Yeah.
You just gotta know the right people with the claims and.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll give it a shot. I'm
wicked.
This is really cool. At least.
You'll at least be impressed with the suction, and then. There's a million ways you can put together a dredge, and this was basically my way to make this the most accessible from a manufacturing perspective, where I don't have to float the pump, I don't have to float the battery, but I still want you to have as much, freedom as you can, given what it is.
I think I actually have some of this hose kicking around too, so if I...
Beauty. Is that...
It looks like 1.5 inches.
Yeah, this is 2-inch hose.
Oh, 2-inch, okay.
Yeah. Is your hose, like the sort of Keen Engineering dredge hose, or is it?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that's made by what is the company called? I forget. I don't know. This is made by Greenline Hose and Fittings.
Oh, Greenline. Well, Greenline's a distributor.
Their hose is slightly different in the 3-inch and 4-inch sizes.
Oh.
And so it's like some dredge hose is thicker and heavier duty, but significantly heavier. And then there's like proper ducting, which is like when the sides crinkle and accordion and catch your gold. So this is pretty much the lightest duty hose you can get away with, which perfectly matches an electric dredge.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, it should be able to thread into, like, regardless of the brand that makes this.
So there's threading in here. That's
yes.
the what this
yeah.
Okay.
So even if this isn't glued in, it actually just threads in.
Okay.
And I would normally say you don't need to glue this because I was just using Alberta Fine Flour Gold for a test, and I wanted to not have it escaping through this point. But I mean, you can print out whatever ones of these you need, and at some point I might adjust the helixes to get to match, like once I've dialed into a hose specifically.
Sure. And it's nice to have that all purpose made for, but what'll be interesting, if I can end up taking this to New Zealand, which I intend to. The area that I go in New Zealand, we don't find fine gold at all. The reason we don't find it is because we're sniping. Most of that's getting blown out when you're waving. You can't realistically see it.
I noticed that this weekend. If you took some pans, there was actually some pretty good stuff in a pan, but you're just
can't.
No, it's not worth it. I'm not sitting here panning for gold.
When I was in New Zealand, we were sniping. I sniped for 11 days straight.
Oh wow!
And you'd fan, and you could see a flake of gold go by, and you would stop.
Even just like disconnect the hose. You got 2 hours on a 30 amp hour battery.
Yeah.
You got an extension cord.
Yeah.
You could even just to keep the muck down in your hole, just use it as a bit of a jet and like fan.
That's what I'm saying.
Jet,
is like if you can get down, because
I should actually get you the file for some of like the jets. So when I did all my testing for setting up the efficiency, I actually had these little tips on here, and it'll just get you a 15 millimeter tip that you can just plug into the jet hose. So unplug it from the jet, and then you've got a crevice cleaner. Open stuff up and
to blow material. Oh, okay.
Like, why not? You've got a 5-foot hose and a bilge pump, and you can use this to blast stuff as well as plug it into your gold dredge. And
when you're on really good ground, at least in the areas I've sniped, and this is true for BC and New Zealand, when you're on really good ground, you hit this hard pack layer that is clay.
Yeah.
And it just clouds up everything.
Yeah, you can't see anything.
So being able to just suck all that material out and get it out of the hole is
even just
huge.
Sniping without the dredge sucking anything and like using it to clean your vision.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like even just to clear the area, so because half the time when I've been sniping is just waiting for it to clear out so you can see.
Yeah.
And then if there's a piece of gold, you gotta like wave it, wait for it to clear.
Hope that it's still there. Get your stuffer in there.
And then try to get the piece out. It's can be very tedious.
And it's tedious when you're picking up 1 and 2 gram nuggets to be like, oh yeah, I want this little flake because I can see it.
Yeah. So you just it's all about efficiency.
Cool. Well, yeah, no, I really look forward to actually seeing this in action, and off camera I'll ask you a few more questions about what I should put in a box, and do I need a bigger box and change stuff around or whatever. But we'll
chat about
we'll leave it with you, and cool. I'd love your feedback, and
absolutely
we'll have to check out the old Gold Trek one of these days.
Yeah, maybe we'll pull one out here. Yeah, sweet, cool. Awesome. Thanks.
But yeah, I don't know if this is gonna make it into a video or not, but it may be like a podcast format. We'll just cut out the quiet sections and chat plastic and dredges and high bankers, and absolute pleasure.
Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, absolutely, man. Likewise.
Yeah.
If it makes a video, it makes a video. If not, then that's cool.
Awesome.
But it's all very interesting stuff, and I could probably talk material science all day if you let me. I nerd out about the stuff, but I think other people think it's boring.
Even just talking the subtle differences of high banker design, you're like, because you've been through the process of trying this, and this, and you can just you can go for ages. But
I could I have all those are my prototypes. So those that's every major step.
Yeah.
Like there's hundreds of iterations.
And were those 3D printed before you then got?
No, all my prototypes all my non-metal prototypes are machined ABS or
Oh,
machine.
so you actually machine the plastic out of a solid piece.
Yeah,
so you don't have to go through the injection molding scale of everything. That's pretty cool.
Just for prototyping, but it's a very expensive way to prototype. You know, if you get a nylon part made, I could probably grab one of my gold pans. Yeah. And it basically starts as a block of plastic. And they got to machine that out and clean it and deburr it. And
I never even thought about machining plastics. But
we do it all the time.
Why not?
We prototype 3 or 4 products a month.
But now you've got your big printer, you can basically 3D print all of your ideas.
Yeah, so like the cost of machining one part, I can buy 2 3D printers and kind of, but you know, you lose some fidelity with 3D printing that you get with, because you know when you have a fully machine, this is really nice.
Look at the literally words drawn.
Okay, let me rephrase. I lose fidelity because I'm not a professional 3D printer. Yeah. I have to say I'm thoroughly impressed by the quality of this
unreal.
Print.
So. But anyways, let's leave it at that because we could talk for hours. So to anyone who has suffered through our long drawn out talk about random things,
thank you.
We'll see you in the next video. As always, cheers and thank you for watching, everybody. Nice.